Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 347 of the Psychology World podcast with me, Con Whiteley. And today's episode is on tips, tricks and perseverance, applying for a PhD with Alia. And it is Saturday, the 27th of September 2025 as I record this. So, today's podcast episode is going to be the second half of my interview with Alia from a few weeks ago. And in this podcast episode, we learn about PhDs, tips for applying for PhDs, how the PhDs work, and Alia is so insightful into the PhD process. Not only because she's actually started her own PhD, but she also talks about the sheer perseverance that you need, the stuff that she learns, her struggles when applying for a PhD, and she gives you so many tips and tricks that I know you're going to find this really, really useful. So by the end of today's podcast episode, you'll go in to understand what are some tips for applying for a PhD, how to actually apply for a PhD, lots about the supervisor relationship, and a whole bunch of other great tips. Like if you want to apply for a PhD, you really do need to keep listening. I cannot recommend it enough. So you got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is feeling accepted versus tolerated. Diversity and inclusion have become central priorities for many organisations, with a wide range of strategies emerging to guide how differences are recognised and valued in the workplace. Yet, we know less about the subtle and lived nuances of more complex experiences, such as the experience of feeling tolerated in these contexts, a state that goes beyond exclusion, but falls slightly short of feeling like real acceptance. In the British Journal of Social Psychology, a team explores these feelings, asking how different diversity approaches can shape the experience of LGBT plus workers. They find that identity blind approaches, where everyone is treated the same without highlighting differences, are more likely to cause feelings of being put up with rather than truly accepted. Okay, so even though I'm actually not going to go into the article in any more detail than that, I do understand where this is coming from, because at the end of the day, all of us are a different. For example, society is made up of black, white, different ethnicities, men, women, other genders, and then there's going to be straight, gay, bisexual, and other sexualities too. Like, we cannot pretend these differences don't exist. And also, people with a different cultural background, for example, whether you're born in a country, whether you've immigrated from another country, whether you're rich or poor, all these differences make up society, and these differences should be celebrated and encouraged. Like, it's this intermingling of different cultures that makes, like, the UK, for example, the great country that it is. And when we ignore these differences, then that doesn't actually achieve anything. And it's when you would go to places like London and other cities, which are like cultural melting pot. Like, that's what I like going to London, and because it's such a diverse city. And if you take a walk, then you can go through like Chinatown, Soho, and other quite close to other places, and experience so many different cultures, and that's what makes London so interesting to me. Therefore, when we pretend that everyone is the same and society is just made up of these monotonous characteristics, that one does not help anyone, and two, it does just make you feel though that the differences are being tolerated and not accepted. Because if you're accepted, then naturally you will have the freedom to express yourself, be who you are, and you're able to embrace and express your unique identity. And if everyone is treated the same, that cannot happen. So, therefore, the takeaway from this psychology news section is that identity blind approaches are, are not good, and that we should be celebrating different identities, whatever your sexuality, whatever your race, whatever your background. So, just some food for thought. So, the second one is hand positioning affects our grasp of emotions. Our hands do a lot more than grasp objects. Their movement help other people to metaphorically grasp our meaning. The suggestions that we make what we talk assist in conveying what it is that we are trying to say. And if we're interacting with a baby who yet can't understand speech, simply pointing can actually show them what it is we're talking about. Recent studies have shown that our hand movements also help to give away what we're feeling. In fact, work led by Eleanor Blair at Beckman University of London has found that the hands, more than the arms, head, and torso, seem to play a particularly important role in communicating emotion. In a new paper in Emotion, Bryan and colleagues now report new insights into exactly how that happens. Okay, so again, though, so I won't go into the article any more than that. But as someone who spends a lot of time talking not with their hands, I really do understand this because I always talk with my hands, and I think that part of it is just that I want to convey emotion. I want to convey, sorry, how passionate I am, how interested I am, and I think that if you do a bit of like hand movement and a bit of like gesture, and one, it makes you come alive, it makes you more interesting, and it gives you a little more oomph, I think. And I know oomph is not a very technical term though. When I started to read that, I had my hands sort of like together down by my stomach. But now I'm moving my hands back and I feel more passionate, I feel more energized. So there's definitely that cognitive and emotional link between our movements and and what our hands are doing and how we're conveying. This is even more important when we can consider that over 90% of our communication is non-verbal. So what we do with our hands, how well we position our bodies, how well we look at someone, is all conveying emotional information to someone. So, what I would suggest, perhaps a takeaway at the end of this psychology news section, is if we just take a moment and this week, and why don't we try and focus on our hand movements? So, like when you're really happy, when you're really angry, take a note of what your hands are doing though, and are they helping and are they reinforcing your point, or are they hindering you? For example, you might feel really happy, but if your hands are just down by your side, if you're sitting on your hands, and if your hands are being like quite emotionless, then maybe try and like amplify. Maybe try and add in a few hand movements. It might help you. So the last one is, what makes self forgiveness so difficult? We often remind others on making a mistake that they're human and to forgive is divine. But when it comes to ourselves, forgiveness can be a little more elusive. And whilst a growing body of research has begun to examine what it means to forgive oneself, less is known about the experience of those who find self forgiveness difficult or even impossible. Writing in the Journal of Self and Identity, a team explores why people remain caught in cycles of guilt and shame, whilst others are able to move forward. They find that self forgiveness is not only a discrete experience, but a process that takes time, reflection, and support from others. Insights which are both helpful to clinical practice and when navigating personal difficulties. So personally, I really like these sort of psychology news articles because I've spoken before on the podcast that I used to really struggle with self forgiveness. I used to ruminate a lot. I used to beat myself up. But when we come across these psychology news articles, which are a lot more helpful and they're very easy to apply to everyday life, then this is what I love psychology. Psychology is meant to help people, and these brilliant articles are really helpful in doing that. And this is definitely what I found. As my mental health has gotten better, as I've been able to move from disorganized a attachment to more secure a attachment, and as I've been able to have a healthy relationship with myself, my identity, and my thoughts. And this is a process that has taken time, a lot of self reflection, and a self awareness, and some support from others, especially a mental health professional. It's been really helpful, and now I am able to forgive myself, especially about a lot of the difficulties that I've had socially in the past because my autism, but also disorganized attachment and all the friendships that I've lost. So it's been really helpful to be able to embrace self forgiveness too. So that's been really useful. And I hope that because of this research and especially this journal article, now we're in clinical practice and we're navigating our own difficulties. This actually provides us some concrete tips and tricks to help us with our own self forgiveness because we are only a human, and however we have reacted in the moment, it's okay, it's understandable, and it's a normal reaction. And yes, the outcome and the consequence of the action might not have been brilliant, it might have been harmful to others or ourselves and our relationships, but now we can do better in the future. So I hope you enjoy the psychology news section. So let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal updates. This week has been brilliant and a lot of fun for a whole bunch of different reasons. But I do have some sort of exciting psychology news. So I went for two job interviews this week to be a teaching assistant in a special educational needs school. And I thought the interviews were interviews. I thought they went somewhat well, but I wasn't really sure if special education work was for me. Then I get a phone call coming back from another job interview, and the guy said, "Oh, can you please call me back?" Turns out I've got a job. So I'm now very pleased and very proud to announce that I'm going to be a teaching assistant in a special education needs school at some point in the future. I need to go through a lot of onboarding and a lot of checks first of all, and then training and other stuff. But I'm very pleased with it because these are children, they're brilliant, and I'm really looking forward to working with them because they've all got special educational needs, they've all got learning disabilities, and a few other conditions. So this is actually going to be really useful for me in the future, especially because I want to be a clinical psychologist. So this will hopefully give me a few years of a clinical psychology experience, which should be brilliant. So I don't think that it's going to be challenging at times. It's definitely going to be stressful, but after everything that I've been through, I'm looking forward to another challenge. And it does mean that it's term time only, which means I still will get to do lots of really fun projects in the school holidays, which I am looking forward to. So after a long job hunt with lots of job applications, lots of interviews, I finally have a job and I'm really pleased. So as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwiley@connorwiley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwiley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet me on Twitter at sci-fi-wiley. I always love to hear from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And also, please feel free to send pictures of where you're listening from. I always love to see where all of you are all over the world. So today's podcast episode has been sponsored by Applied Psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to real-world problems. So this is a brilliant sponsor for today's episode because Alia talks a lot about her PhD, but also about health behaviours. And the thing about applied psychology is that this brilliant book and this brilliant field allows us to apply psychological research into tackling a real-world behaviour like stopping smoking, reading interventions for children, language interventions. It also covers as a business psychology, as like how to reduce workplace stress, and a lot of other health behaviours, which Alia is actually going to be looking at in her PhD. So this book really does build on nicely from today's podcast episode. But then this great, really easy to understand book also covers a lot of additional topics, like what is sports psychology, what does a sports psychologist do, how is that sort of theory applied to sporting problems, and also conspiracy theories, missing affirmation, leadership, and so many other brilliant topics that I flat out love. I cannot recommend this a brilliant book enough. So that is a applied psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to real-world problems. Available from all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and hardback version from Amazon, local bookstore, and local library if you request it. And if you want the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence, then now you can, as selected audiobook retailers like Spotify, Kobo, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble, and select library systems too, like Overdrive, Bacon Taylor, and Biblioteca. So whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And so it's a massive thank you to my patrons. Your support shows that you like the show and you want to continue. So if you want to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards, including over 80 exclusive blog posts, which won't be made into podcast episodes for weeks, months, or even years, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World Podcast. Or if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then now you can at buymeacoffee.com/Connor Wiley. So that's enough for personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be looking at tips, tricks, and perseverance. Applying for a PhD with Alia. So this is a great podcast episode. It was a lot of fun to talk with Alia about PhDs, why she actually wanted to do it, how tough she found the recruitment process, and as I say in today's interview, I've seen Alia after some of her rejections. She was devastated because she's strong, she's persevered, and she's just such a brilliant person. She's actually got a PhD. I know she's going to be flat out amazing at it. So you're in for a massive treat. And now I'm going to tell you a bit about her, and then we will dive into the interview. Alia has just completed her Masters in Developmental Psychology at the University of Kent, where she also completed her undergraduate in psychology. She is currently a PhD student in applied health research, focusing on adolescent social media use and health. Her research interests also include children's play, imagination, and the science of reading. In her spare time, she likes to play badminton, read, do some colouring, and spend time with friends and family. So I know you're going into a flat out love of this in to do with Alia, so let's dive into it, and I will see you on the other side. So we're coming up to the 38-minute mark, though. So to be honest, we probably are going to split this in two different episodes. But in September, you're going to be starting something very exciting. Did you want to tell us about it?
Yes, I do, because it's kind of like a full circle moment, as I was saying before. So, I'm going to be starting a fully funded PhD with the Centre for Health and Service Studies at Kent University. I'm pretty sure I got that right. I'm still learning to get it right. But I should note, actually, I did apply for other funded PhDs through the School of Psychology, and I wasn't successful in those. So if you don't, I learned a lot about like resilience and perseverance this year, because I applied for lots and I put a lot of effort into it, and then I didn't get it. But I am a firm believer in like the right things will come your way when it's time, if that makes sense. So the right things will come along, and better things do come along if you don't get something. So that kind of helped me like stay grounded as well, knowing that something will come my way, even though I didn't believe it at times and it didn't feel like it was going to happen. But yeah, so in September, I think in a couple of weeks, I'll be starting the PhD. The title of it is Applied Health Research, but it's part of this project. So it's the World Health Organization funds this type of research across 41 different countries, and it's about the health behaviour of school-age children. So looking at adolescents, and they get adolescents to do surveys, anonymous surveys, and asking them lots of different questions. So maybe about vaping, smoking habits, drinking habits, sharing family meals, how many fruits and vegetables they eat, social media use, exercise activity. It's just such a broad range of things I get asked, so I'm trying to cover as much as possible and remember as much as possible. But also like about body image as well, about eating behaviour, loneliness, and yeah, there's a lot. And if you're interested in this, it's called the larger project at Kent. Actually, it's not at Kent, it's kind of across the nations. I'm not really sure. I'm also a bit like still learning exactly what the whole thing is. It's called Health Behaviour of School-Age Children, HBSC. And if you look it up online, you'll see reports that they've done in the past, where they've reported on what they found across these surveys, across the UK, but also across countries, across genders, but also they've looked at it across ages, so mainly in adolescents, so it's either 11 or 12, I think it's 11 to 15. And different countries do report on different ages, but at Kent specifically, for the UK, basically the government have said to this lady at Kent, like, oh, can you hire 3 PhD students to sort of do these kind of topics? And I applied for one of those with a research proposal, and she was like, yep, we're happy to have you on board, sort of thing. So I haven't met the other 2 students, but I'm really excited to start, to be honest. I think mainly because they're going to teach me about the stats, and working with such a big data set will be really cool, because my undergrad and master's project, my undergrad dissertation project did have about 400 people, and then my master's project was a bit smaller and it had about 70. So working with thousands of bits of data will be really interesting. I'm also really scared because it's statistics, but it's quite normal to be scared of stats. But they're going to teach me how to deal with that, but then also write for policymakers and write our findings academically, but also for lay people and in different formats. And it really aligns with what I want to do in the future post PhD, where I want to translate complex information into something that's understandable, because rarely do you get like people who have spent years in research who can do this. So I want to be one of those people who can spend my time really getting to grips with research, really understanding it, being able to collect, analyse and summarise data for people like policymakers who can make a difference, who don't have those skills and that time to do the research themselves.
Wow, that sounds amazing. And because I've known you for so long, I know you are going to be incredible at it. But I completely agree about how scary the stats sounds. So, like for my masters of research, I was only doing correlations of like 70, 80 people. Having to do statistics for thousands of people just sounds mind blowing and just insane. But well done for wanting to do it, because because like it's going to be hard, but I know you're going to be great at it.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's definitely going to be hard doing a PhD because I don't think you've ever heard a PhD student go, mine was easy. But that's, I guess,
No,
the best bit of it is that I can make it my full-time job, because PhDs tend to be, the fully funded ones at least, you are funded, so that is your full-time job. Um, and that's kind of across the UK. If you get a fully funded one, it tends to be that you can do it as your full-time job. And some of them have contracts where you can't actually pick up work outside of it because they expect you to spend a lot of time on it. So if you're thinking about doing a PhD, but you're not sure if you've got enough funding to live beyond the stipend, I would check their contracts and information. But yeah, you do need a lot of perseverance when applying, though, I will say. It's a tough process as well, because your competition are the same people who are getting like top marks. They are in the same position as you, and they're really passionate about research. They know what they want to do, and they've really thought about their studies as well. So yeah, I don't, beyond that, I don't really know what else to say, but it's good to learn perseverance in that sense. Like, I think that's going to help, that's a
definitely,
skill that's going to help me in the future for sure.
definitely. And like, if I've learned one thing from you over the past year, it is just how much perseverance you have. Because I remember quite a few of our conversations, especially after some of these other PhDs like fell through. And like, if it's okay to say this, if not, I'll edit it out. But you were very sad. You put your heart and soul into these things, and then when they fell through, it's a loss like for anyone though. But I'm so glad though that you haven't like given up because I think you're going to do really well though. So have you got any other tips if someone's applying for a PhD besides perseverance?
I think make sure you get on with your supervisor, have a little meeting, because supervisor relationship was really important to me. And although I'm not doing my PhD with the supervisor I initially intended to with at the beginning of the year, her name is Dr. Angela Nyhout. Please check her out. She does some really cool research on imagination, mental imagery, counterfactual thinking in children. Um, and although I'm not doing it with her, I did still want to make sure my supervisor relationship with the other person was going to be good. And when we had a little chat, I knew it was. And I asked questions as well. There's no shame in asking questions to a supervisor about what things they kind of, how do they support like a little community? How do they, that's kind I don't really know what I was going to try to reword that, but like, yeah, how do they create a little community? What sorts of things do they do to help the student learn and the PhD student be supported? How does the student learn, or like, how will you teach me things I don't know? Is there room for being taught how much I don't know, and like what the supervisor relationship will be like? What do they expect? Another thing is also the university as a whole. If you're choosing to do it at another university that you've not been to, go in person and check it out and see if you can like meet with the person, with your potential supervisor, to see if they can show you around for a bit, have lunch with them. I don't know how typical that is actually, but I think it would be nice to do if you can do it and if they're up for it. But also remember that if you don't get your first one, that's okay. And apply for a few as well if you can, maybe across different countries, across universities. But also it does take a lot of time to develop a proposal, so don't try do like 10, maybe try do like 3 at a time, but also be wary of the deadlines that they have, because some of them are at different times. But I looked a a lot of them up online as well about tips for applying for PhDs in the UK. And remember to specify where you want to do it. So if you want to do it in the US, there's different requirements. If you want to do it in the UK, of course, there's different requirements. So just check out all the details to make sure you meet all the requirements. So you don't spend your time making a proposal and then actually you're not eligible for the scholarship or funding, whatever it might be.
Definitely. And I'm really glad that you focused on the whole relationship bit there, because I know when I first started thinking about a PhD, in a moment of like madness, because a PhD is so not for
I
me.
remember.
Yeah, that was just pure madness, like that moment. But I know when I was like thinking about it, I was just thinking about the whole like education side of it. But I didn't actually put like enough focus on the relationship side because you're going to be stuck at doing it for like 3 or 4 years, and you don't want to be with someone that you don't like, and it's going to be like a lot of stress and a lot of work though. So you don't need yet another stressor of having a bad relationship with your supervisor. And also,
Definitely.
yes,
Yeah.
it's a relationship, so there will be some good moments and bad moments. But if you can have a like generally good relationship, then that's going to improve your health and your mental health throughout it a lot more. So definitely,
Yeah, so I chose my supervisor because well, initially I read one of her papers and I was like, I love this research, it's amazing. And then I approached her and said I want to do a PhD, and then she helped guide my ideas so that we could do one that I liked and applied for. I didn't get those in the end, but it was still a really interesting journey, and it was nice that she knew how I worked as well, because I did my master's with her. She knew how I worked and knew I needed like deadlines, and I'd set deadlines, and I liked that I knew how to work with her. Like it wasn't a whole new person at my master's. It was the same person who knew me from undergrad. And it's nice that she's seen me progress as well. I think that's also a nice thing. And having a special kind of relationship, like we don't just talk about academics, we talk about other things too. And like when I have something exciting or exciting news, I know I'll just drop her a message or I'll go see her and tell her. And I think that's, yeah, like you said, like having a good supervisor relationship, I think is important to a PhD, especially if you're quite like a personable person. I feel like it can make or break it kind of.
yeah,
In some instances, it can make or break it. I don't want to say it can for everyone in case it doesn't. But I think it is
yeah.
really important for people. So
Because that's one of the reasons why I flat out loved my masters, and I think that it might be quite similar for you though, because I've heard about your and Angela's like conversations. I've like quite a lot, and it was really nice though, like for me and Hannah, because we did just get on like so well. We spoke about like each other's lives, and it was almost like a sort of like friendship relationship. That's what made my masters even more memorable. And I think it's the same like for you and Angela. Both of you love working together.
yeah, I think it's made it a lot better, definitely. And then for my masters, I worked with one of my colleagues, Rosina Tolley, on a project, and she trusted us fully because she knew us. She trusted us fully to be really independent, and we were, and it gave us a lot of confidence in our decisions. And it was really nice to work with Rosina on the state. Like we collected data together, but we analysed different bits of it. But it was nice to do together and be trusted. And she wasn't like a helicopter supervisor, just checking in all the time. Like if we needed something, we would check in and we would ask, rather than her saying, "Oh, like how's it going?" every week, if that makes sense. Like if she knew if we needed something, we'd come to her, and I think that's really important because it allowed us to build a lot of confidence around research, especially for me because I'm always like second guessing myself. But this year I learned a lot about not doing that. But also, I would say one of the PhD tips I forgot to mention is that if you meet with your supervisor, or if you can see any of their ex-PhD students who have like graduated, reach out to the students via LinkedIn or via email. See if they respond, explain who you are, explain that you're planning to apply for a PhD with so and so in this topic. You don't have to go into too much detail, I don't think. Just give them some context as to who you are and why you're contacting them. And you can ask them about any tips or advice they have or reflect about their experience, because as you would on an open day, you'd speak to students who are currently studying there. So why not do that with a PhD? And you can definitely do it with a PhD. A lot of supervisors I was thinking about asking to be my PhD supervisor a few years ago, I spoke to their ex-students because that gave me an insight into how they might work during a PhD and how that might be different from a master's supervision. How that might be different from master's supervision.
Yeah, definitely. That's actually a really good tip. Thank you for sharing that because I hadn't even thought of that, but that would be really useful. And I think having that open day mindset is really impactful, and I think that tip's actually going to help a lot of people. So we're coming up to the. So are there any other tips or tricks that you might have for either other PhDs, aspiring psychology students, or just anyone at university?
My main tip is post-graduation and with the job market right now, it is hard, and give yourself some credit. But if you're quite early on in your degrees or experiences, try build up your CV doing various different things because the job market is really competitive and you're competing with people who have graduated for years or just graduated as well. So it is very difficult. So I would say build as much experience as you can without overwhelming yourself.
I couldn't agree more. Never true words have been spoken. I know that pain all too well. And if I don't laugh, I will cry about it.
Yeah, it's rough.
Although,
It is because a lot of people do psychology, so you just want to help yourself later on to stand out.
so if people having enjoyed today's interview, where could they find you online? Like LinkedIn or anything?
Yeah, so I have LinkedIn and my handle, I think it's just my name. It should just be Alia Awan, so Alia and then space and then Awan, Awan.
Brilliant. Thank you. This has been a brilliant conversation. It's going to be really useful. And best of luck with your PhD and in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for listening as well to all listeners.
So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. I know that I did because this interview with Alia, well, I always like talking with Alia because she's really passionate, engaging, and she's a packed full of great information, especially when it comes to applying for PhDs. That's something that I don't have experience with. And I always really like it that she talks really clearly, easy to understand, and she's very mindful of the listener. So that's something that I, as a podcast host, really appreciate. And I know that you got lots of great information out of this, because I know I certainly did. And if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, then please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help us spread the words about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, then please check out Applied Psychology, applying social psychology, cognitive psychology, and more to real world problems. Available in all of these places. And if you want to become a patron of the show and get access to tons of great rewards and support the podcast on a monthly basis, then now you can. Patreon.com/The Psychology World Podcast. Or you can support the podcast on a one-off basis at buymeacoffee.com/Con Wiley. So, have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwiley.net. So have a great day and I'll see you next time.